So far this summer, Manchester United have made two very good signings by bringing Matheus Cunha and Brian Mbeumo into the club, and also played one pretty dull pre-season friendly, which now leaves us all thinking, what happens next? What is the next step for Manchester United? We've been chasing Brian Mbeumo for so long. What do we do now? Well, according to you guys, we go out and sign a central midfielder. I did a poll on the channel the other day and 50% of people wanted a new midfielder brought into the club. Now, I'm assuming the idea for most of you guys is you want a Bruno Fernandes partner. I'm assuming Bruno Fernandes is going to be our midfielder next season, so we need a new player to play alongside him. And if we listen to Ruben Amorim, it seems as though he personally wants a little bit more speed and mobility in the centre of the park. So today we're going to assess the current problems at Manchester United, figure out what we need to solve those problems, and then recommend some players. So before we can take a look at what United need, we need to take a look at what United currently have in terms of the profile that we currently have in midfield with Casemiro, and also the tactical issues that we are facing. And this was one of the things that we pointed out in our match video the other day. Manchester United have a big old space in midfield. You can see Casemiro here is responsible in the high press for a lot of space. Casemiro is a player who has to cover left, he has to cover right, because Bruno Fernandes is pressing higher. So Casemiro in this game against Leeds was given a lot of space. Just take that in for 1 second. Just look how much room there is that Casemiro is sort of kind of half responsible for. Of course, the rest of the United players can move and they can drop and they can help out. But in this moment here, in this freeze frame, Casemiro has a lot of space that he potentially needs to cover. So this is one of the tactical problems that we have. Casemiro simply has too much space to cover. And when we look at Casemiro in just a few minutes' time, we know he can't really do that. Now, one of the reasons why Casemiro struggles dealing with these large spaces is because it requires changes of direction. If there's a big space, in one moment he's going to have to defend towards the right-hand side and then towards the left, or he's going to have to drop deep and go closer. So there are changes of direction. And in order to change direction at high speed, you need to be agile. And Casemiro isn't agile. First of all, here we see a tactical problem. Casemiro is dropping a little bit deeper into the defensive backline. He is following the Leeds player. This means that in terms of pressure high up the pitch, Manchester United are incredibly passive. Leeds carry the ball forward very, very easily. This isn't a Casemiro problem. This is a Manchester United and a Ruben Amorim problem. Leeds carry the ball forward far too easily. Casemiro eventually shifts off from the player that he was previously covering and now decides to be more aggressive. He comes out towards the ball. This is where his inability to change direction at speed is a problem. His lack of agility is a real issue, because as the opposition player throws in a fairly basic bit of skill, but it was executed well, Casemiro just can't. Casemiro cannot turn quick enough, and in these moments, it's a problem because he just gets left looking a little bit silly on the floor. As well as lacking the ability to change direction at high speed, Casemiro also just struggles with high speed. You know, he's not a quick footballer. In the Premier League last season, he clocked the 4th lowest top speed in the league. Like, he's just a slow footballer, and that's not a criticism, that's just an observation about what he is as a player. He's never been quick, but particularly right now, he's really quite slow. And for last season, we could make it work. But if we're trying to take the next step to be a better football team, it's a bit of a problem. Because you can see, it's a difficult role for Casemiro. He's got to be pressing high in moments like this, helping the team to connect, stop passes into midfield. But when he can't stop those passes into midfield, when there are third-man combinations from the opposition, or 1-2s as well, which are really a problem for us at the moment, Casemiro's just left behind. We're going to see here this little triangle play from Leeds. It's a 1-2 just around the corner. And Casemiro realistically would be expected to drop into that space to provide cover, to intercept the pass and stop the move ever really coming to anything. The problem is, he can't. He's just not quick enough. The Leeds player pulls away from him so easily, and Casemiro is forced to just bring him down. A more mobile midfielder wouldn't have this problem, but Casemiro isn't very mobile. We can see it again in a situation like this. Casemiro pressing high, being required to move forward to try and help United nick the ball. But as Leeds move the ball past that and play a few little passes here and eventually move the ball back inside the pitch, Casemiro doesn't have the ability to go with the man. That's the man he needs to follow. He needs to track that guy, but he can't. He just can't. So eventually he changes target. He sort of acknowledges that he can't track the player, so goes for a different tackle. And again, it's a problem. So those are the problems that we've got with Casemiro in midfield. Now we need to think about his partner Bruno Fernandes, because Casemiro isn't perfect and neither is Bruno. But Bruno does bring a lot to the team, even from this new deeper position. So when Bruno Fernandes is playing in deeper roles, one thing he will always bring to us defensively is intensity. Bruno Fernandes is a player that works incredibly hard, he covers a lot of distance, and he's not slow. You know, he's not the quickest player in the world, but he's not slow. He can get across the pitch. And like I said, he is going to bring intensity. He is going to bring ground coverage, and he is going to set the example with his work rate, which is brilliant. You need that next to Casemiro. The problem for Bruno is just defensively, he's not actually particularly strong. So he'll put the effort in, he'll cover the ground, he'll be intense. But in terms of actually making good tackles or having the physicality to go shoulder to shoulder or using the straight arm to get across the opposition, Bruno sort of lacks that. He's not a defensive midfielder, is he? He's never going to be a ball-winning midfielder because that's not what he's been moulded to be. So that's where Manchester United have a slight problem. We've got Casemiro with the inability to cover ground and a lack of agility in certain moments, and then also Bruno, who's not very strong defensively. There's also a slight problem on the ball as well. Bruno Fernandes from the deeper position brings ball progression. That's fantastic. We've needed that for so long. Having a central midfielder that can get on the ball in the middle of the park and have an amazing passing range is something that United have been crying out for a long, long time. So it's great that we've got Bruno Fernandes for this. By playing him deeper, we're getting him on the ball more, where we can see more of his passing, which can only be a good thing. We also know that Bruno brings incredible creativity in the final third. In this system, when he's given the license to get further forward, he's one of the best in the world. In terms of creative midfielders, I think he's the best on the planet still. I think he's that good. But he's not a player that necessarily is great with his ball retention. Because he puts the ball at risk, you know, with his creativity, with his ideas, that does mean that sometimes he loses the ball. Well, actually, quite regularly, he loses the ball. So that's a problem that Manchester United have got going on midfield here. So we've got Bruno with his flaws, Casemiro with his flaws, and they just don't quite really blend together. Now, one thing that I just need to make very, very clear is that Bruno Fernandes is still a good footballer. He's still got all the ability to play in central midfield. I think he can do that. I think he can work as part of a double pivot. I also think the same of Casemiro. I think he's a great footballer. His experience is invaluable, and he's an intelligent player who could play in a double pivot or in a midfield three in the modern day. Very capable of doing that. The problem is, do they go together? Do the two of them sort of complement each other? And I just don't think they do, to be honest. The inability to win the ball at times is a problem. Also the inability to cycle the ball and keep possession becomes a problem. So what Manchester United need, if we're looking for a partner for Fernandes, is something just different to Casemiro. Not necessarily better, just different. We need athleticism. We need a player that can cover a lot of ground at high speed. Amorim said it the other day and he's not wrong. Manchester United need to be able to cover the ground quicker in the middle of the park, and Casemiro is not going to bring that, so we need something new there. We also need, though, some physical size. Casemiro is a big fella. Losing that from the middle of the pitch is a problem if we don't replace it. Casemiro is also really useful for us on set pieces. So again, losing that height would be a bit of a problem. We've already spoken about the fact that Bruno isn't the strongest. He's not the most physical, not the best in a tackle. So we need someone next to him who is. Someone who can do those things. So I think from a defensive point of view, what we're looking for is not necessarily someone to always join high in the press, but someone who's got enough energy to cover in front of the defence, got the athleticism and the speed to cover the ground, and the mobility as well. In terms of on the ball, I actually think it's a fairly simple role that we require next to Bruno Fernandes. I think as fans, we want a specialist. We want a press-resistant central midfielder. Someone to drop into the first phase, take the ball off the goalkeeper, drop the shoulder, turn, and move United forward. Kobbie Mainoo could probably do that. So the fact that Kobbie isn't being used in this position sort of suggests that Amorim doesn't want what we want. As fans, we want press resistance, we want a specialist. I think what Amorim requires is a bit more simple, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think he wants his other midfielder next to Bruno just to be a retention option, someone who just keeps the ball for the team. So Bruno Fernandes is given the license to be expressive, to be creative, to play with freedom in the final third. Whereas the player next to him just needs to keep it simple. We can't have too many players putting the ball at risk. So I think what Amorim really wants is that nice retention pass who's going to look after the ball and keep the ball and be technically secure. Although I do also think that the long passing is something that he would want, but I think you can find that. Now, if that is what Amorim wants, if I am right, which I think I am, maybe you'll disagree with me in the comments, let me know. But if that is what Amorim wants, I think it's very, very easy to find. And what's great about it, this profile that we're looking for now, is there's so many different players that can do it at different price ranges. You know, you could go for an £80 million player that can do this, but there are also some £18 million players out there as well. I think some examples that I like that United have been linked with in the past 18 months, even if they have moved. Sander Berge at Fulham is a drum I will keep banging. This is someone that I've been talking about for the best part of 6 years now. Sander Berge is a top footballer. We were linked to him last summer. He would complement Bruno Fernandes quite nicely in the double pivot. Amadou Onana at Aston Villa is another one. He is a top athletic midfielder, someone who covers the ground incredibly well, is strong, tall, powerful, on the ball, pretty simple player, not press resistant, but keeps the ball for his team, and his long passing is actually incredibly underrated. I think another option is Boubacar Kamara, staying at Aston Villa, another number 6, who is one of the few players in football who I think could play as a lone defensive midfielder, a lone 6 as the pivot in midfield, and that is what Manchester United are looking for. Kamara is a very good player defensively, doesn't quite eat the ground in the same way that someone like Onana does, but still very athletic, still very mobile, and on the ball, very, very effective in the first phase. You want another option as well? Okay, how about Lucien Agume? We literally did a video on him the other week, talking about how he could be perfect for the Manchester United midfield. Agume would be a top option, very secure on the ball, very technical with a really high ceiling, but defensively very, very good about doing his job as well. You want another? How about Palacios from Bayer Leverkusen? A bit more of a technician here, someone who's a bit more of a pass-focused player rather than the defensive side of the game. But Palacios is someone who could play as an 8 in a double pivot or as a lone 6, sitting in front of his defence and using his passing game to keep the ball for the team. Defensively, he's no slouch either. He's not the quickest player in the world, but he covers ground much better than what Casemiro does. He's much more agile and also a little bit stronger in the tackle. Another option that I like is Andre Santos, who last season played his football for Strasbourg and is now back at Chelsea. Again, if you're looking for a complete physical profile, a very solid midfielder who can cover the ground well, win his duels and go shoulder to shoulder, but also offer you technical quality on the ball, that's a player you look at. And then I think the big obvious one that so many people have been speaking about is not Edison, although he is an option, Baleba from Brighton. Again, if you're looking for size, the ability to win duels, the ability to win aerial duels, but also being strong on the ball, press resistant actually in this case, and also a good passer, although I think he can improve a little bit. Baleba is right there, although he would be quite expensive. The point I'm trying to make, though, is there are so many options out there for Manchester United. There is so much fuss about finding the right player, the right profile. But once you do identify the profile, actually finding the players that tick the boxes is incredibly easy. I could easily talk about another 5, 6, maybe 7 different players that could play next to Bruno Fernandes in midfield in Amorim's system, because Amorim doesn't seem to want a specialist. He wants someone a bit more simple, and I think there are so many of those options on the market. So that is what I want to prove with that little last segment of the video there. The options are out there. So yes, that is that for today's video. How Amorim can stick with his tactical ideas, which I don't completely agree with, but he can stick with his ideas if he wants to be stubborn, but still find a way to be successful by bringing a new player into the club. There's plenty of options out there. We know what we need. Now United just need to go and find it, spend the money, get the player into the club as quick as possible, and then build the midfield around that. In terms of, for now, it's just a case of waiting and seeing what happens. There's nothing left for us to talk about, so I'm going to stop talking. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please leave a like, subscribe, and also get your notifications on. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.